Good evening, my little 5-time Soapbox Derby champions. We are going to be making our own pigments into liquid form. You're going to be going from this to this to, I promise to get a better picture. So let's do science o'clock. And you know it's science o'clock because I'm wearing my glasses, which makes me look smart. Pro tip, kids. We're going to basically be making two types of substances here. Solutions and mixtures. A solution's a substance in which all the ingredients mix together to the point where they won't come apart again. Whereas a mixture, the particulates get suspended in it, they'll separate over time. Let's find ourselves some pigments. See what's in the old spice cabinet. Pigments aplenty. Basically the rule is if it stains your fingers, it's gonna be good. Right up front here, paprika. Dried berries, herbs, some things that aren't very nicely colored, boring. Curry powder. The number one ingredient is turmeric. Yes, I have tons of tea, but those are just my backup boxes. I'm gonna give this a whirl. The freezer. Frozen berries. That's a pretty safe bet. And because I drink so little of it, my coffee is in the freezer. Charcoal? Where do I get that? If you want to use something that's in bean or stick or bark or whatever form, you might have to bust it up, because just putting these beans in the water won't leach out as much pigment. I didn't grind these into a fine powder. There's still big chunks and probably a few whole beans in there still, but I'm not looking to make my ink with a powdered pigment. I'm looking to leach the pigment out of these beans into my vehicle, because water is your vehicle. You can use cups, you don't have to have jars. My curry powder, in which my primary ingredient is turmeric. Frozen bloobs. Science fact. All plants have a cell wall, and water molecules expand when they freeze, and you end up rupturing the cell walls. And that's why when you unfreeze broccoli and cook it, it's always going to be mushy. I don't have to break up the frozen blueberries very much, because the water that froze inside them already broke them up for me. There's my charcoal. I'm going to pulverize this. This came right out of my wood stove. You don't have a wood stove? Store-bought is fine. Look at that beautiful dried pigment. Rose petals. Sometimes flower petals can give us some pigment. I'm going to use more of these than I'll use something that's already a powder, like the turmeric. I have a feeling that it's less concentrated. That's just me making an educated guess. They're kind of expensive, so I put some back. There you go. I now have 11 different substances found in my house that I am going to turn into, or try and turn into inks. Some would make pretty decent dry pigments, like the charcoal, the chalk, the paprika, or the turmeric that's in the curry powder. That's really all I can smell right now. It's very potent. Everything's going to leach differently, everything's going to look differently. Some will be mixtures, and some will be solutions. I'm going to add some water to all of these, as little water as I can possibly get away with, because when you're trying to leach out the pigments in these, you want to have it as concentrated as possible. Because you can always dilute later, but you can't reconcentrate something if you make it dilute in the first place. We should be wearing our eye protection if we're going to use vinegar, because for some reason it's considered a dangerous substance, so I don't know. And then you're going to let them sit for the day. You can put a lid on them, you don't have to. Make sure they're in a safe spot and they're not going to get accidentally knocked over, because we don't want your family to get mad. Quick note, when they're steeping, double check to make sure there's enough water, because something like the dried flowers, they've soaked up a lot of the moisture. Day 2. This is where we can really tell when we have a solution or a mixture. If we look at tea, that is obviously a solution because no settling happened. Versus the turmeric. See it? It all settled into the bottom, and almost none of that pigment is still in the water. That's a mixture. Now, just because something's a mixture doesn't mean we can't use it. You can absolutely use the charcoal, the chalk, the turmeric. So let's get straining. By the way, they will fade over time. They'll also funk up over time. They're not meant to last forever. If you put the vinegar in them, they'll last a little longer. and they're not light fast. The light will cause the pigment to fade fairly quickly, like in a year. Let's see how they paint. The ones that are more mixtures than solutions will need to be shaken right up to the point when you paint with them. You can see the little bits of material in it, all those little ground up pieces of charcoal. If I scoop up some, I can get more of a dark tone because I'm getting more pigment. We're seeing a lot of earth tones. When are we going to get to some more vibrant colors? Well, my friends, allow me to introduce you to frozen blueberries. As it dries, it becomes more purple, gets that indigo color. It's the only thing you can call it, indigo. Apricot is one of the ones that's going to need a shake. Looks like hot sauce. Black tea? I bet it's not black. Now, if you had herbal teas, like if you went and got some celestial seasonings, you could get more colors because I've seen like lemon zingers pink, which is weird. And finally, my turmeric. And again, another one that's going to need a shake up. A really nice yellow color. There you have a range of tones and hues coming from my own handmade inks. Unsurprisingly, some of these colors dried much darker. So where you had the pink, you have more of a brown color. Dried elderberry turned out to be a much nicer raw umber color that I'm actually very surprised and pleased with. The frozen blueberries are straight up blue, so now we know why they've been calling them all those years. Next video, I'm going to show you how to do a little bit of ink wash painting in color. Have fun with that. There's a chemical reaction happening in the chalk. I don't know what that is because I'm not a science teacher. I'm totally a science teacher.